This administration is not at all what it promised us it would be. It's the most ideological administration in modern American history. They have a political agenda they want to pass, and they put that even ahead of their political ambitions. They will sacrifice dozens of Democratic congressmen in this fall election rather than back off and moderate their agenda. They're willing to throw those people under the bus, thank goodness for it, rather than moderate their agenda. They promised transparency in Washington when they took office. Everything's done behind closed doors, and nothing is as it seems. Everything's spun. You're seeing a Chicago thuggery type of politics here, where they're interfering in state elections, trying to buy off candidates so their preferred candidate can win. No respect for the law. We saw this in this town with the GM bankruptcy. Yeah, we're all glad GM and Chrysler are still hurt here, but they busted the law all to pieces to make that bankruptcy go the way they wanted. And they picked winners and losers. If you worked at Delphi and were a union member, you got your pension. If you were a white-collar worker, secretary, clerk, manager, you didn't get your pension. We're dividing America into different classes of people. The class that supports his liberal agenda and everybody else. And they are oblivious to public sentiment. You ask me what I am most worried about? I'm worried about even if they lose control of Congress, lose their big majorities in Congress, that November to January will be the most dangerous period in this country's history, because they'll use that lame duck Congress to rush through everything that they haven't been able to pass during this first 18 months. And that's not a whole lot. They've had a pretty good run of passing their agenda these last 18 months, much to, not to the good of the country at all. We're going to see card check rammed through, cap and trade rammed through. Everything that's left on their wish list, they'll try to ram through on a wholly partisan vote between November and January. Wasn't this supposed to be the post-partisan president? Yeah. Everything he's passed has been only with Democratic votes. Wasn't he supposed to be the post-racial president? He has played the race card and tried to play off our racial divisions at every opportunity. They stubbornly press their policies even though they see they're not working. When they passed the $800 billion stimulus bill, they told us it would reduce unemployment under 8%. We're at 9.5% today, and the real rate may be much higher. We should be in a rapid recovery, given the depths that we were in this recession, and our economy is still struggling to revive, and we still aren't putting people back to work. They promised us in every one of these bills they passed, we'll put people back to work, and people still aren't working. And yet they keep spending, they keep passing 10, 20, 30, $40 billion packages that mostly go to support their special interest and their agenda. The effect of that is that we're now at risk of moving into a double-dip recession. Business is scared to death here. We have a climate here where folks are afraid to invest their money. They don't know what their future obligations are going to be in terms of taxes, in terms of the health care bill, what other cap and trade, what other regulations are headed their way. They have no way of knowing what the future holds, so they're hanging on to their money. The Fortune 500 companies are sitting on $2 trillion in cash that should be moving through the economy. And they're sitting on it, and they will tell you they're sitting on it and have said they're sitting on it because they don't know what the future economic environment is going to be. There's uncertainty, and uncertainty always depresses investment and economic activity. Obama is repeating many of the mistakes FDR made in prolonging the recession. Every time in the 30s, every time the economy started to show signs of life, he'd whack it with another tax, another anti-business measure. This administration is doing the same darn thing. I have a proposal on the table to tax energy firms, oil and gas firms, $80 billion in new taxes over the next decade. Now, okay, everybody hates oil and gas companies, I guess, or we're supposed to. But can you imagine what's going to happen if we put $80 billion in new taxes on this industry? Every single thing you buy, the cost of every single thing you buy or use will go up. Employments will go down, job creation will go down. It's just the natural way the economy works. You suck more money out of the private sector, whether it's the oil industry or the banking industry or whatever industry, jobs are going to decline. Cap and trade will put millions of Americans out of work, and they don't care about that. They don't care about that. They are perfectly fine with taking this country and turning it into a European-style socialist state with an institutionalized 10% unemployment rate, where 10% of the population is wholly dependent on the government, if that's what it takes to get their agenda in place. It's unfashionable, it's politically incorrect to say Barack Obama is a socialist. I know this, he's not a capitalist. Nothing in his policies suggests that he's a capitalist, and he continues to pass socialist policies and to push socialist policies. Call him what you like, but he's making the same mistakes intentionally, I believe, that FDR made, and he will prolong this recession. We'll go into another recession and another recession until we won't know what good times look like, and more of us are dependent on the federal government for our daily bread. As I said earlier, we're seeing a disparity develop between public sector workers and private sector workers. Federal employees, household incomes went up 2.5% last year. In Michigan, household incomes fell 2.5% for all households, for private sector households even more. And yet the public employees in this state will get a 3% increase this year in their wages while we're having to cut funding for the services you all depend on.
And they're cutting defense.
They're not listening to us. They're not hearing us. They will not listen unless we send a loud message here in a little under 3 months. I mean, Ruth mentioned that you guys have 700 members now. My challenge to you is make that 7,000 members by November 3rd. Because they can't hear you. You need more voices. They won't listen. You need to shout louder. You need to get more people out there going to the polls. I'm going to finish by talking about a little bit about the Michigan election, the upcoming Michigan race. I know many of you, many conservatives, aren't entirely satisfied with the Republican Yeah, I know. I'm trying to hold it.
Try not stepping on the court. That's where.
You know, that may be a good idea. I know a lot of people aren't satisfied with Rick Snyder, think he's not quite conservative enough, doesn't come out of the mainstream conservative movement. I'm not here to defend Rick Snyder. I'm saying he's conservative enough for me when compared to the alternative. And I think the worst thing conservative voters can do this fall is say, well, I don't, you know, they're not quite pure enough in terms of their conservatism. I'm going to stay home. You stay home and the Democrats will hang on to the legislature, hang on to the Supreme Court, and it'll be a decade to come before you have another chance like this. I think, you know, we see all over the country people saying, well, we didn't get our Tea Party candidate elected, we didn't get our conservative candidate nominated, we're not quite as excited. I think you've got to look at the mission here in a different way. Yes, it would be terrific to get true conservatives, freedom-loving candidates committed to upholding the Constitution at every stage elected this fall. But it's just as important, if not more so, to deprive the liberals who are running this country into the ground of their allies in Congress and the state houses. It's more important to get rid of a Harry Reid, Nevada. More important to get rid of a Barbara Boxer in California. More important to replace these folks who won't listen to what we're saying than it is to get an ideologically pure candidate elected. The most important thing is to deprive the Obama administration of its allies in Congress and put a stop to this nonsense that we've seen for the last 18 months. I'm going to stop right there and take some questions. I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions because we ran out last time I was here. But again, I want to thank you all for having me. First hand up.
Do you think it would be possible to deprive the people of their pensions in the lame duck, Congress, if they vote for